Friends, good afternoon. Again, Yurii Lutsenko, and I would like to introduce our very prominent guest, one of the probably the most prominent Ukrainian diplomats, Volodymyr Yelchenko. I mean, his story is very long. One of the true founders of Ukrainian diplomacy, Ukraine's representative in UN twice, ambassador to USA and Russia and Austria, a person with huge wealth of experience, Volodymyr Yelchenko. Today we're going to continue our conversation about what we call illegal presence of Russian Federation in the United Nations and Security Council. Volodymyr, welcome.
Thank you very much, Yurii. I'm glad to be with you today. And I think that the topic you raised is indeed very pertinent, because for more than 30 years, the question of the presence of the Russian Federation in the United Nations and, in fact, in all of the international organization system is under question. The other thing is that not many experts, politicians, or even countries in general agree that the time is ripe to raise this issue, and especially to come to the practical steps to solve it. I would say that this is the real problem. This problem has two dimensions, of course, as usual in international politics, legal and political. And I think that it would be useful to concentrate on the legal aspects of this issue.
Absolutely, because basically my proposal to you, Volodymyr, today is talk purely, we're not talking about today's situation. That would be the next step, right? But today we talk about purely legal foundations and legal sort of basis for so-called successorship of Russia. I mean, successorship of Russia in the United Nations from the Soviet Union, because everybody, or at least anybody who knows a little bit is aware that in the UN Charter, there is no such country as Russian Federation. There is Soviet Union. Volodymyr, let's start from the very beginning. So let's talk about 1945. Let's talk about the very establishment of the United Nations.
Well, the UN Charter is full of paradoxes. And for example, if you take the article where it says about the so-called enemy states, which were at that time Germany and Japan. But I don't think that anyone would question, for example, this particular article, because this is simply not the fact of life today, because these two countries are the UN members, they're not enemy states for more than 70 years already. But at the same time, there are several articles in the UN Charter devoted to the composition and functions of the UN Security Council. And one of those articles says that there are 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, namely China, France, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America. The question is, where is the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics today? Its place was occupied, you may say,
Russia.
Illegally, by the Russian Federation.
Let's talk about this a little bit more before we move to practical sort of conversation. So basically what happened in 1991 is that Russia, in fact, there are only, let's simplify. Obviously, we'll talk a little more in details about it, but Russia basically declared itself a successor of this Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. And as far as we know by now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there are only 2 documents that are that Russian Federation is trying to present as a sort of legal ground, which is really not. I mean, number 1 document is famous Yeltsin letter, basically saying, oh, we're Russia now. I mean, bottom line. And number 2 is so-called Almaty Declaration, where the other countries of the former Soviet Union are saying that, they don't mind. Number one, Yeltsin letter, in my sort of lay person opinion, Yeltsin letter in terms of the UN Charter and UN rules and regulations, it bears exactly the same the same significance if Yurii Lutsenko write to Volodymyr Yelchenko, oh, I'm Russia now, and the second so-called the Almaty Declaration, it's non-obligatory. It's basically, it bears no legal weight. So the main point that we're trying to prove, and obviously we'll get your comment now on this, is that Russia should have gone because Soviet Union was dissolved. The key word, dissolved. So Russia, just like other countries of the former Soviet Union, apart from Ukraine and Belarus, who were the founding members, should have gone through the process of approval of the General Assembly. It was never done.
Absolutely. And this was the case in many cases. For example, later it was the former Yugoslavia, and all 6 former republics of the former Yugoslavia sort of applied for the UN membership. They were successfully admitted. There was the case of the former Czechoslovakia, with Czech and Slovakia separately
I was just
applied.
about to say that. Czechs never said, oh, no, we're big guys,
We can go,
they replied.
We can go even deeper into history. For example, Rhodesia, Mozambique, Angola, and many more African states which used to be, states in different shape, and then they broke down. They were freed from the colonial rules. They used to be, not many people remember this, so-called United Arab Republic, which consisted of modern Egypt and Syria. And when they broke down, both
Again,
former members
both reapplied.
There was Bangladesh, born as a result of the changes, India, Pakistan, and so on, so on. So I never counted, but I think that there would be more than a dozen or even 24 countries which went through the same issue.
So there are like over we can say there are over 24 precedents where the former country was dissolved.
Yes, and
the new countries that were created based on
parts of those former countries, or the new countries born as a result.
They applied to the UN from scratch, in fact. And moreover, if we're talking about the Soviet Union, it was dissolved, but technically on paper, obviously this during all Soviet years, this was not really a right that they could exercise. Nevertheless, technically, all countries of the former Soviet Union were independent countries that formed a union. Okay? So that even strengthens our position that a non-existent country in the UN Charter, Russia had to apply.
Yeah. Now, coming back to the issue of the Almaty Declaration and the famous or infamous Yeltsin letter. First of all, the order of things was different. First was declaration, and then there was Yeltsin.
No, I just said
it's okay.
Not in
I would imagine that for at least having more legal purity.
Let me interrupt you. For our viewers in North America and in English-speaking country, let's quickly explain what we mean by Almaty Declaration and Yeltsin letter.
Yeah. Okay. Almaty Declaration is a document which was signed by the 12 CIS, Commonwealth of Independent States countries, which came together to Almaty, which is the capital of Kazakhstan, and signed the declaration, which is very short. It consists of a few articles, one of which devoted to the sort of international aspects. And they say that they agree with the fact that that the Russian Federation would continue the former Soviet Union in the United Nations, or continue membership. But first of all, this declaration was not signed by all 12. Georgia never signed it. And by the way, a couple of years ago, I think it was after 2008, after the invasion of Russia of Georgia, they started the process. At least they had a plan to question the fact that Georgia was the part of that decision, but it was a non-starter, and they stopped any efforts in that direction. And secondly, now I'm coming to our own country, Ukraine. Even although Ukraine signed it, I mean, the Alma-Ata Declaration.
Let me interrupt you, because I'm very active on Twitter on this issue, right? And some pro-Russian bots are sending me scans and circling Kravchuk's signature. So it's actually it's still a part of this pro-Russian milieu on Twitter, trying to prove that there is some legality in Russia's presence.
Yes. So Ukraine. The former late President Kravchuk of Ukraine, he did sign this declaration, but Ukraine never ratified the CIS Charter. So even in case if someone would say that, look, Ukraine's signature is there, but legally,
It's a piece of paper.
As a non-member of the CIS, this signature means nothing. Because if you don't ratify the charter of the organization, you cannot be considered as a member of that organization. So yes, Ukraine did participate in some activities of the Commonwealth of Independent States for several years, but we never considered ourselves as a member. So
full member.
Yeah.
Although participated
full-fledged
in
member.
Full-fledged member, right.
So
right.
we can put the situation like this. Well, of course, declaration is a non-binding document, obviously. But
legally it's non-binding.
Even if you pretend to
that it's a binding
consider this binding document, it cannot be binding because it was never agreed by at least 2 of 12 members.
Signatories of this.
And then comes this so-called Yeltsin letter. Yeltsin was the president of the Russian Federation at that time. I would imagine that for having at least some sort of legal, purity, that letter should have been signed by Mr. Gorbachev as a president of the former country, who would say or inform the United Nations that his country, the country he presided, ceased to exist, and from now on it comes to the Russian Federation.
Delegating these responsibilities to Mr. Yeltsin.
Then at least it would add some, legal arguments
ground.
for those who defend that, this is the case. But it didn't happen as well. I heard
it was basically a letter saying, "Oh, we're no longer USSR. Russia is now USSR."
Yeah, but it never happened. So Yeltsin signed the letter addressed to the UN Secretary General, saying that from now on, based on this Alma-Ata Declaration, the Russian Federation will continue the membership of the former Soviet Union in the United Nations, including the permanent seat in the UN Security Council. But even in this case, we managed to find in the UN archives a very interesting document which was never published, although you can find it if you Google, you can, I hope, because we managed to find it many years ago. I'm not sure that it still exists an internet.
This was your during your tenure as Ukraine's permanent
it was during my first tenure. We found it in the UN Secretariat. This is a very short and precise ad-memoir signed by the former legal counsel of the United Nations, which is I would say, the person number one in the UN system when it comes to any legal issue, be it application for the membership, the right of the state, to do this and that, what should be done, the procedural things, many, thousands of things. So without his signature, nothing can.
Without his go ahead, nothing can happen.
Yeah. So when the former UN Secretary General received this letter from President Yeltsin, obviously he sent it down to the legal counsel for the legal consultation.
For legal opinion.
Legal opinion. And the legal counsel said in one page that in fact, according to his opinion, and as I said, this is the opinion number one,
in the UN system.
In the system from the legal point of view, he said that, look, this is a very simple case. The Russian Federation, as a newly created or newly appeared state, should reapply for the UN membership.
Well,
and then the Security Council considers this letter of reapplication.
Actually, application rather than reapplication.
Oh, for application. The Security Council sends it to the United Nations General Assembly for consideration by the whole membership, because this is about the new member of the United Nations, and it should be considered, debated, and voted in the UN General Assembly. Now it's 193 states. At that time there was like 160 plus. But anyway, General Assembly votes, or it can be taken by consensus without a vote. It doesn't matter. And then if this application is approved, it is being sent back to the UN Security Council for the final decision. And then 15 members of the UN Security Council vote for giving to the new country, in this case Russian Federation, the right to become the member of the United Nations. This is exactly what was done in case which we already discussed, the former Yugoslavia, former Czechoslovakia, and many, many more. Nothing was done. So I think at that time there were political considerations, probably by some other permanent members of the UN Security Council, that look, we are dealing with the country with a huge nuclear arsenal. The developments in that country are positive, new country.
And yet unpredictable.
Yet unpredictable. So let us agree with the fact that this country is basically, it's a big part of the former other country, so let's just give it a chance. There are facts about which I heard many times that that was like idea fix of President Yeltsin. He wanted to become the UN member and the permanent member of the Security Council tomorrow. He didn't want to wait. And just imagine, we're talking about the 22nd, 23rd, 24th of December. 1991. One day before Christmas.
Yeah,
if it would come to the application, new application or reapplication, it would take some
months,
days
or even months.
Probably weeks. And Russia would not be admitted or considered as a new member state until the beginning of 1992. So the decision was taken. Another funny thing is that this letter of Yeltsin was presented to the UN Security Council membership by the permanent representative of the USSR, Mr. Vorontsov, who was the president of the UN Security Council at that time.
At the time, yeah.
So Russia just didn't want to prolong this issue until the next month, because in the next month, according to the English alphabetic order, the Security Council president would be, I'm not sure, but either the United States or United Kingdom. And who knows? Couple
This
weeks
is one of
more.
the reasons why they rushed so much.
Yeah, they wanted
as
to
of
do
January
it.
1st,
Yes.
1992, if it wouldn't have been the USSR presiding, but US or UK.
And I don't exclude that, for example, the UK delegation would say, look, we need another opinion by the legal counsel. We need to go to the General Assembly. We need to think. Let us give some, time for that. So it would prolong the process. And when something is started to being discussed in the UN, it may take weeks and months. So Russia was very much afraid of having this kind of.
You see, I know the topic quite well, but thank you very much for our viewers that you reminded us this fact that they rushed so much and did it exactly the way they did it because they were so much afraid of just getting this issue delayed for some future. Okay, Volodymyr, so basically, bottom line is, number one, we know that Russian Federation has never gone through proper procedure of being admitted to the United Nations, leave alone Security Council. Because as we know, since Soviet Union was dissolved, Russia had to apply from scratch, just like other countries of the Soviet Union, just like Czech Republic and Slovakia, and you've already listed at least 10 precedents, right? I would propose now, obviously we both understand that this happened due to consent. Let's call it consent, purely political, which has nothing to do with anything legal or legitimate. Purely political consent from certain people in the administration of other Security Council members. Let's put it this way. we both know what we mean. But that's not the subject of our discussion now. I would propose, basically, we have established the fact that Russia is there absolutely illegally. There's no legal ground for Russia to be neither at the United Nations nor at the Security Council. I would ask you now to elaborate on your thinking. What would be the practical steps to correct this major injustice? And again, we're not talking about the current Russia crimes. That would be, again, just like we said before, that's the next step. But purely from legal point of view, what would be, in your opinion, what would be the next steps to correct this injustice that was done 30 years ago and basically that lasts for more than 30 years, and sort of to precede a little bit some argument of the opponents of this opinion. There are many people who are saying, oh, no, then, what do we do? For 31 years, what do we do with all the decisions of the UN and the Security Council? And our answer is yours and mine and anybody who has any common sense is the China precedent. I mean, it's as simple as that. So, because till 1971, the Republic of China, which is Taiwan, was the member of the UN Security Council and the member of the UN, and nothing happened during all these years. Nothing happened with the UN decisions, so nobody canceled anything. And so this argument just simply doesn't fly. So first, if you would be so kind to comment on this China precedent a little bit, and then I would ask you seriously to elaborate on the practical steps how to correct this injustice of Russian Federation being in the UN and the Security Council.
Okay, good question. Well, first of all, the so-called Chinese case. Yes, it's not fully applicable, maybe, to our case.
No, I'm not saying it's applicable. I'm just saying that this is the argument of some people.
And it's interesting to go into the historic details. Yes, there was a UN General Assembly resolution in 1971. In fact, the idea of this resolution was born 10 years before that, sometime in 1961. And it took 10 years to sort of create the necessary ground of support for the idea of, kicking the Republic of China at that time out of the UN. This is the country which we know now as Taiwan.
As Taiwan, yes.
And in its place to admit.
And again, let me interrupt. We all appreciate how much Taiwan is helping us now and how much Taiwan is on Ukraine's side. We're not criticizing or anything. We're just talking about history.
This doesn't mean that someone should recognize now Taiwan as a sort of sovereign country. And this is, totally,
we're leaving all of this
totally
aside.
different topic.
We appreciate Taiwanese position in the current situation.
So, by that time, by 1971, the international community did recognize that, in fact, the territory of China is controlled by the People's Republic of China government, by the central government sitting in Beijing. Rather than in Taipei.
And again, for our viewers who are not familiar with the situation, when the UN was created, obviously Republic of China under Chiang Kai-shek was the legal government of China.
Yes, that's why they became the founding member.
Yes, and that's they became the founding member, and they stayed on until 1971, and then.
So at that time, the UN General Assembly took a decision. There was a resolution which actually excluded the Republic of China from the United Nations, and in their place, the People's Republic of China was admitted. Effectively taking the permanent seat in the UN Security Council. So the case is very similar if you look at the procedure. In that case, and even now, if we would go for the resolution of the same character about Russian Federation, it would require 2/3 majority in the UN General Assembly. It was done in 1971. General Assembly recommended to the UN Security Council to consider this case. It was considered, voted, and the decision was taken, the positive decision. And the new delegation took the seat of the former delegation. And by the way, I came across some time ago a very interesting short article written by the American jurist of Indian descent, who proposed to take this case as an example to exclude Russian Federation from the United Nations. He referred to the General Assembly resolution taken at the beginning of March of this year, which condemned the Russian aggression against Ukraine, and he proposed that Russia should be excluded from the UN, and Ukraine should take the Russian permanent seat in the Security Council. I don't think this is the case, of course. We never pretended for that, and we're not talking about one country replacing another in the Security Council. This would make things even more complicated. So,
it's unrealistic. Well,
it's
from
unrealistic.
a point of view of moral ground,
Yes, but from the legal point of view,
realistically, it's unrealistic scenario. Absolutely unrealistic.
Absolutely.
We have to be very open about
But
it.
the interesting fact why I'm referring to this is that there are already, I don't think this is the only person in the United States or in the world who is, considering with great attention, this situation. So I'm pretty sure that there are hundreds of lawyers in the world which would happily, take up this issue and make the case.
Basically, let me interrupt you again, but the whole idea of this series of talks and conversations is basically to gather momentum and to raise awareness in the world that this is what should be done. Not only from moral ground. This is something that we're leaving aside, but purely from legal ground. And actually, what we're saying is that these are the facts, and these facts can be confirmed and supported by many, many, many serious, very serious representatives of legal profession. And you're just confirming.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's come to your first point. What are the practical steps which can be done? Well, there are many of them. Some are extremely complex. Some are pretty easy technically and from the organizational point of view. I would not put them into the order, but let me just
lay it out.
Mention a few. First thing which comes to my mind is another resolution of the General Assembly, which was adopted in 1962, which started the process of total isolation of the South African apartheid regime. I think its number is 1761, if I remember correctly.
Resolution number.
Yeah. It was adopted in 1961. This is a very complex, long resolution consisting of many parts. And the relevance of this resolution is that it actually started the legal process of not exclusion of South Africa from the United Nations, but of total isolation of the country, of non-recognition of legality and sort of credentiality of the apartheid South African government for human rights violations, for many things,
many
sanctions, trade embargo, the prohibition of flights, connections with the country. And that resolution, the main point of that resolution was the recommendation of the General Assembly, or even not recommendation, it was a request. The General Assembly requested the United Nations Security Council to consider this, and then comes the long list of things. Sanctions, embargo, diplomatic relations, non-recognition, and so on and so on. So it took altogether more than 25 years for the solving of the problem when the regime of apartheid was raised from the ground at the end of the 80s, actually. So it took many years. But we can use this precedent to start sort of the process, asking the Security Council to consider this and that. But this will not probably end up with the exclusion of Russia. But this may add a lot to the issue of further isolation of the Russian Federation in the world. Now we have sanctions of the EU, of United States, of many other countries.
And in fact, list of sanctions that are applied against Russia is probably more extensive than the list of sanctions that was against South African apartheid government.
But
this is,
the importance of such a step. Why I'm referring to this, because we need one way or another to get the support of not just European or North American countries. We need the support of Latin America, Asia, Africa, Arab countries. For them, such a resolution would be a very powerful signal that something very serious is happening, and there is a need for some action. Now, the second, probably less complicated politically, but
the first one, before you go to the second, the first one is really kind of, I see it as a tool, but not as a main sort of road to go.
Yes, you're right. It's not a step, it's a tool.
It's a tool.
It's a complementary tool.
It's a complementary tool because, just like you mentioned correctly, it doesn't really apply because we're talking about, in South African apartheid government, we're talking about violation of human rights and so on, which is the case now. But again, it's just like you said correctly, it's not a step, it's a tool, a very, very important complementary tool. Yes, I fully agree with you.
Now, less complicated, but more legalistic approach or step, the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice. Again, for that, we would need the decision of the UN General Assembly, not necessarily of the UN Security Council. And this is important because it cannot be vetoed. Georgia tried to go this way sometime in 2008, but somehow they stopped. Probably they didn't work hard enough. I don't know, I don't remember exactly, but they were trying to produce the text which would be adopted by the General Assembly. The case was to ask whether the Russian actions in Georgia, meaning in Abkhazia and South Ossetia, were legal and right, and sort of. So they never finished that case.
So it's not that they failed; they just never sort of brought it to any fruition, right?
Yeah, probably they considered that they would never get the necessary number of votes.
Yeah.
I don't know. In our case, in case we're discussing right now, I think it may be done, at least, I hope that this work is being done already, but probably not in the open, I would say. The General Assembly would ask, in very simple terms, the International Court of Justice to consider the things which we are discussing right now. Whether things which happened at the end of 1991 were legal or not. One can formulate pretty easily the questions. Make them not political.
Very neutral, purely legalistic.
Not referring to the
current aggression.
What kind of letter was signed by whom and sent to whom and when, and whether Alma-Ata was legal or not, but just a couple of questions. What is the procedure for becoming the UN member? One. Second, whether the letter signed by the president of another country can be considered as the
legal ground
for
admission,
for action on another country, and so on and so forth. I think that in fact that kind of resolution may get the necessary majority of 2/3, and then comes, of course, the decision itself. I don't think that the International Court of Justice, which is like the heaven of legal community, minds, they would never say something to the contrary. Obviously, they would say what is legal, and they would say what we are seeking for. The other question is whether Russia would ever recognize
The decision of
the decision of the court. But this is advisory opinion. It's not a decision. It's not obligatory. But it has a lot of moral weight.
Yeah.
And again, like in the first case of apartheid, it would send a very powerful signal to the world that something was wrong.
So basically, what you're saying is that based on the opinion of the court, it would not be inconceivable, or actually it's quite possible, that after the decision of the court, if this question is brought to the General Assembly, it has much more much better chances to get the necessary 2/3.
Yeah. And then to come to the third step, the decision by the Security Council or whatever. So let's just keep this option.
But again, for our viewers, we have to remind that when and if, because I would like to actually say, don't say if, I would like to say when the thing will happen. Am I correct by saying that Russia will not be voting because it's a subject of discussion?
Yes. In fact, then another article of the UN Charter would be applicable. And it would be much more harder for Russia to say that, no, this is not our case, we cannot follow this case and things like that. And but again, we are talking about sort of creating the grounds for the decision which we are seeking for, the exclusion of Russia from the United Nations.
Correct.
And this is one of the tools. Now I will come to the simpler things or steps which don't require any kind of decisions. I would call it the policy of, I don't remember exactly this Chinese proverb, like, 1,000 bites policy, or many bites. For example,
mosquito bites.
Yeah. But it may be very painful for the Russian delegation in the United Nations, and from the moral point of view, it will be also quite problematic for them. It doesn't require any majority, any vote. Just one country, or the group of countries, can simply send the request to the UN Secretariat asking to present or to produce, to provide the documents which were the ground for Russia to continue the membership of the former Soviet Union. And then again comes this letter by Yeltsin, Almaty Declaration, probably some diplomatic notes, I don't remember exactly. There were many documents around this story. But again, it would be interesting to see how the UN Secretariat reacts. And it cannot produce anything which would prove that Russia there is legally.
Legal grounds for Russia's presence at the UN.
Even more simple thing is to ask for the, I would say, applicability of the Russian delegation credentials in the United Nations. There is so-called Committee on Credentials in the United Nations General Assembly. It is a very technical body. I don't remember its membership changes every year. But again, there are different countries there. Maybe even Russia is there. But the committee votes very rarely. So they take a decision by consensus. But even the fact that this issue would start to be discussed, and one country can ask the Credentials Committee, which is coming together every beginning of the next session of the UN General Assembly, which is, by the way, next week, asking them very simple question. to question the credentials
Yeah,
of the
what
Russian
are the
delegation.
grounds for
What are
the
grounds?
credentials of Russian Federation
Yes,
delegation?
they will be signed probably by President Putin, I don't know. Because normally they are signed by the president or at least the foreign minister or the prime minister. But again, then comes the question,
On
who
what
are
ground?
these guys?
Yeah, what ground?
Yeah. And as I said, it will bring some real problems to the Russians to explain, to speak out in the General Assembly, in the Credentials Committee, to explain what are the things. And it would be interesting to hear, their logic, their arguments.
Well, you see, Russia lies so much. Every day. I mean, again, on Twitter, I tweet once in like couple of days, and it gets thousands of likes. I tweet, Russia speaks, Russia lies.
Yeah.
Russia opens its mouth, Russia lies.
But what I mean, I can imagine hundreds of world media
Of course.
standing around the hall of the UN Credentials Committee, waiting to hear this kind of discussion.
No, yeah, absolutely.
And well, another thing, even simpler, although it would require some underground sort of activity, and when Russian delegation or any Russian representative enters the UN building, it is normally being checked the ID, whatever UN credentials. And some UN security guys may ask them, "Can I see your pass?" Say, "Yes, here it is." What is this country? We don't have you on the list. Things like that.
There is no such country in the charter.
Yeah. And probably the last thing which comes to my mind, we did that several times when Ukraine was on the UN Security Council in 2016-17. This was my second term as UN ambassador. When the Syrian representative would speak at the meeting of the UN Security Council, some countries or ambassadors like Ukraine, US, France, United Kingdom, some other Europeans would just stand up and leave the meeting hall. This is also a very powerful moral signal. Yes, of course, I can imagine that the representative of China would not follow, or of some African country. But again, it would send a very good signal.
So let me sum up. I think all these sort of paths that you've indicated can be combined. Because, sending the reference to the court is wonderful. Because our ultimate goal is not as much of sort of shaming Russians, right? I mean, they have no shame for a long time. Our ultimate goal is to basically prove to the world that Russia is illegally in the UN and to strip them of their seat.
Yeah.
And then ask them to apply from scratch, just as they should have done from the very beginning. And then obviously...
And then we will see the result.
Yeah. But bottom line is, they will fight their teeth and nail. Because for them, it's really a very, very... They consider, their presence at the UN Security Council and their veto power as one of the main foundations of today's Putinist Russia. And I don't know how long it will take, but I am a true believer that this will eventually happen. And that would be such a powerful blow to this fascist regime. And I hope it's not going to take too long.
No. And in the end, it will just bring justice back.
Absolutely, because we're talking about correcting major injustice. Volodymyr, thank you very much. It was
My
indeed a
pleasure.
very, very, very fruitful, very interesting, and very insightful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.